Hello, world. Xin chào tất cả. And the reason I wanted to record this message today is to communicate some discoveries I've made while doing some research online. Tại sao hồi xưa mình đánh giặc như nước Mỹ, như nước Tây? I wanted to bring this topic up because I want you to understand the reason why the Vietnam War happened, the French Indochina War, which was the first Vietnam War, and then the second war with the United States, which was the Vietnam War that we know. That there was indeed a precursor to the Vietnam War that was seldom mentioned or understood in the history books between K through 12 public education system in the U.S. and elsewhere in the world. Là trong sách mà khó hiểu lắm. Khó hiểu. It's very difficult subject to understand. In my research, I've discovered that throughout the period of the early 1900s, rubber was particularly in high demand in the United States. The United States was in heavy demand of rubber because the rubber was needed to make tires for a new invention called the automobile, the car. A recently popularized Ford Model T made Ford Motors an economic powerhouse, which drove up the demand for rubber tires. Prior to the Vietnam War in the 1960s up to 1975, it was through French occupation that low-cost Vietnamese coolie labor made it possible to harvest from the rubber tree, which flourished in the subtropical climate of nations such as Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, namely Vietnam. Vietnam happened to grow rubber trees in abundance. The work was long and arduous, and the workers often not having enough representation, and even going to the extent of calling the work exploitation. It's not found in other countries other than Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Firestone Tires and Rubber Company, or Firestone Tires and Rubber Co., which is owned by Bridgestone Corporation. This company employed low-cost labor to do the work, and the hours were long, they were arduous, and workers were not having enough representation, and even going to the extent of calling the work exploitation. Working regulations and worker education was not up to speed as it was with workers' rights. Chưa có workers' rights trong nước Việt Nam như ở trong nước Mỹ. Chưa có regulations and workers' rights and all these things that protect the worker. It was Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, owned by Bridgestone Corporation, that had supplied the rubber tires to the now, at the time, popular Ford Model T. While the Vietnamese workers worked and toiled, it was the communist ideology of Marx and Engels, worker exploitation, the language that's used, that had grown rapidly because of the limit on workplace regulation and worker education. Chưa biết workers' rights mà kiếm được the Red Book. They found the communist ideology, and so this is what they understood. They understood that they were being exploited rather than being paid fairly, or there was probably no human resources at the time. There was probably no way to complain to the managers and the leaders of the company about the working conditions. So this is what set the brush fires for the communist ideology. Although correlation is not causation, this had set the stage for the proliferation of the ideology to other branches of the laborers, which began to rebel against the ills of capitalism, imperialism, and worker exploitation. These are some of my own words, even though I don't agree with them. These are some of the words that are extrapolated from the language that is being used during this time, because well, even though I am pro-free market, I understand that there are some aspects of capitalism, such as antitrusts. There's a need for antitrusts because the big banks can gang up on the American consumer The large corporations can gang up on the American consumer. And there's a reason to make sure that these companies don't get too big and too powerful, that the workers have no voice. Since both France and then the U.S. were involved in the war, with the South Democratic pro-free market Vietnam being aided by the U.S. during the John F. Kennedy, the Lyndon B. Johnson, and the Richard Nixon presidential administrations, talks of independence and liberation began to spring in the hearts of men, albeit from the pro-communist forces or North Vietnam, led by then leader Ho Chi Minh. Vietnam wanted to be a nation in its own right.